Welcome to the Putnam County Library Lunch and Learn. Today we are joined by Tracy Bruneau, who will be discussing the Dementia Navigator program. Take it away, Tracy.
Hello everybody, happy Monday. Like Spencer said, I'm Tracy Bruneau. I am with the Putnam County Health Department and I am a Dementia Navigator. So I'm going to kind of talk about what that means, what our services are, and how it can help our community with resources for Alzheimer's. So having said that, so what is a Dementia Navigator? So a Dementia Navigator, first of all, is a free service provided by the Putnam County Health Department. So there is no charge for this fee. Our goal and our job is to bring education to our community about Alzheimer's, other forms of dementia, talk about risk factors or risk reduction, so things that we are able to do to hopefully decrease our chances of developing a diagnosis of dementia. We want to partner and get in with our local primary care physicians to address early detection and diagnosis and what is the importance of that. We hold memory screenings in the community. Those memory screenings can then be taken by the individual to their primary care physicians for them to review that, see if there's any follow-up that is needed with that. And most importantly to me is that we work with people with dementia and their family members or their caregivers, trying to get them connected to local resources so that they can get more education, they can get involved with support groups, and just provide them resources that they need. Respite care is probably one of the highest things that I find for caregivers and for myself when I was caring for my mother with Alzheimer's. So having said that, this is very personal to me. My mom has been battling Alzheimer's for about 6 years now, I guess, since her diagnosis. We definitely knew there was something going on prior to the diagnosis. She was able to pass memory screens without a hitch, so that's not a catch-all. But back then we just did not know a lot about the disease. We didn't know about any of our local resources or support systems until much later. So I'm going to be addressing today kind of what is the importance of early detection and diagnosis, what can we do to try and prevent that, and if we are a caregiver or someone living with dementia, what do we do to help them? So when I meet with a family member or a caregiver, what I initially do is they can either come into the office at the health department. A lot of people are not able to leave the home because they are sitting with someone who has dementia, so I can come to the home and do what we call an intake. And basically what that is I sit down with that person with dementia, if they are able and choose to be part of that, or their caregiver, and we sit down and just go over, okay, what is going on? I just want them to basically take the floor and talk to me and let me know, where are we at in the stage of dementia? What are our challenges? What do they need help with? And then my job is to try and find them resources to get them help, whether it's caregiving and respite care, the support groups, home-based community services to come in, like meal delivery. I can connect them with the resources that they need to get those done. So I can take some of the legwork and the difficulty of them trying to figure out where do I go for these resources. I can find them, and if I have a consent form signed, I can initiate that referral for that person to get a phone call from the resource that they need to help them with that. So it's something that I wish, like I said, I had known about a long time ago. The importance of early detection and diagnosis, I just wanted to touch base real quick with. And people always ask, well, what's the difference? What difference does it make if you get diagnosed here early on in the disease versus later on in the disease? Alzheimer's is a fatal disease. There is no cure for Alzheimer's. So the importance of the early detection and diagnosis, first of all, is being able to make decisions and choices while you still have the capacity to do so. So what I mean by that is, if you do get a diagnosis and you are having early dementia, you have the opportunity to make a lot of choices that you're not going to be able to make later on in the disease, where someone will have to step in and make those for you. So I'm talking about care planning, I'm talking about financial planning, getting advance directives, power of attorneys. These are essential these are essential to get done early, because as the disease does progress, that person is not going to be able to make those decisions, and if you do not have that in place, it becomes a very difficult situation. So it also allows the person with dementia, your bucket list. Start doing things. Go knock off things on your bucket list, things that you want to get done and accomplish before this disease progresses to a point that you're not able to. It allows you to participate in clinical trials. I think this is huge. A lot of things with the clinical trials, if you are not in the early stages of dementia, you miss out on several opportunities. So the clinical trials are wonderful things to get into. Vanderbilt has a wonderful clinical trial program that allows the patient to get into. So that is really, really important. It also allows you to get started on medications. Now the medications currently for Alzheimer's are not going to reverse the disease, but there are several medications that will delay or prolong the progression. And they have the infusions now. There's 2 infusions that are out that can remove some of the amyloid plaques. There are risk factors, definitely, with the infusions. Brain bleed is the big one. So there's a lot of things to discuss with your physician, but you definitely want to make sure. Welcome.
Excuse me for being late.
So there's options out there, and if you've taken care of someone with dementia or Alzheimer's, just being able to give them a medication that can prolong their functionality for a longer period of time is huge. So someone who is, still able to maybe bathe themselves, use the toilet, doing simple tasks, if you can at least give them medication that's going to prolong that, as a caregiver, that is a major milestone. Just having that person being able to continue where they're at for a longer period of time. So early detection diagnosis is very, very important. So with that being said, I've got a little slide here I'm going to show you, and I'm sorry I'm sitting down, but I don't have a clicker here. Oh, I'm not connected to the internet, folks.
Oh, and it should be just Putnam County Library.
That's my fault. As I said, I'm not technology savvy, so.
He is.
Yes, he is.
Oh, hold control and then click. I think it'll let you.
Is it gonna let me do it? My phone's already.
She doesn't know. I know.
Okay.
I just never want to look this blue. Okay.
It's gonna do it.
I'll look for the blue one. Here's the blue one.
No? Well,
Here's the quick one
Thank
too.
you so much.
well, it's not gonna play for me. Okay. That's all right. Okay, well, basically what that slide shows is that we have about 7.2 million people here in the United States that are diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And by the year 2050, that number is expected to more than double. So that's quite a few people living with Alzheimer's. There's around 55 million people worldwide. Alzheimer's since the year 2000 has increased by 145%. That's astronomical. That's a scary thought to think that in just 25 years, Alzheimer's has climbed by 145%. Around 140,000 deaths per year are attributed to Alzheimer's. The annual cost for caring for someone with Alzheimer's is around $384 billion is what they project. That is a huge amount of money, and out of that, When you look at our caregivers here, and I'm sorry that this is so small, but we've got about 12 million family members that provide unpaid care for people with Alzheimer's. That amounts to about $413 billion a year of unpaid caregiving. So our caregivers are under an exorbitant amount of stress. They're doing it 24/7. A lot of people have no resources and finances to get help. So that is a big part of my job, is to try and find places and resources that can help people financially try and get respite care. It disproportionately affects older adults, with about 73% of the cases occurring in individuals that are about 75 and older. And about 1 in 3 people will, over the age of 65, will die with some form of dementia. In Putnam County, I wanted to find out where in Tennessee does Putnam County fall as far as incidence and the high rate of Alzheimer's, and we're at number 50. So currently right now we've got about 10.2% of our population 65 and older that have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. That amounts to about 1,400 people currently living in Putnam County that have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And we just have to remember also that a lot of people are yet diagnosed. So,
I'm gonna say that many more are not diagnosed.
yeah, so many people, like I said, we think it's normal aging or it's put off and things like that. So we have a lot of people that are not diagnosed, but of those that are, this is what Putnam County looks like right now. So we're number 50 in the state of Tennessee. Around 1 in 9 people currently are living with Alzheimer's. Whether or not they're diagnosed, that remains to be seen. So what I'm going to talk to you guys about today mostly is kind of our brain health, and then I'm going to get into like our risk reduction, because that's the big thing that we want to do. So what is our brain health? I mean, our brain health is just how it functions over several different areas. We have our motor function, it controls our movements, it controls our balance. We have our sensory function, so our seeing, hearing, taste, and smell. Tactile function is just how we respond to pressure and temperatures. Emotional function, how we interpret and respond. And then mostly today, what I'm going to be speaking of is our cognitive health, which is our thinking, our learning, and our remembering. So these are what comprise what we refer to as what is our brain health. And we are going to talk about things that affect that today. So our brain, of course, is our control center of our body. We have over 100 billion nerve cells or neurons, and they create networks throughout the brain, and these are how the signals travel. These are how we form memories, our thoughts, our feelings. And the problem with Alzheimer's is that it destroys those brain cells, and it interrupts the connections in the brain for us to have good thinking and memory and knowledge. Our brain is only about 2% body weight, but it makes up about 20% of energy. So it's a small but mighty organ in our body. So very, very important. Our heart-brain connection. So of course the heart and the brain are interrelated, but studies have found that what you do for your heart is also good for your brain. So anything that deals with cardiovascular health, it also is going to be good for our brain. Those two are very much combined. The brain needs blood flow, it needs oxygen in order for it to transport the nutrients and everything we receive. The brain gets about 20 to 25% of the blood from every single heartbeat. So it's taking almost a quarter of the blood for oxygen, for blood flow. So it's a very important organ, and so if you have poor cardiovascular health, you're going to have poor circulation, you're going to have less oxygen traveling to the brain, giving it the nutrients that it needs. So I'm going to talk to you now about what is dementia. So a big misconception a lot of times with dementia is that Alzheimer's and dementia is the same thing. That is not true. So dementia, how we refer to that is basically an umbrella term. And under dementia, you have different types. So you have your Alzheimer's, which makes up the most percentage of dementia, about 60 to 80%. Vascular dementia comes in second with about 10 to 40%. We have Lewy body and frontotemporal, but there are literally hundreds of different types of dementia. you have Parkinson's, you have Huntington's disease. There's many forms of dementia, or diseases that fall under dementia. Dementia is just a collection of symptoms that deal with memory, thinking, behavioral, and psychological issues. It is always due to biological changes in the brain and or injury. So like traumatic brain injuries like the military have, they are at an extremely high risk in developing dementia. Think about your football players getting hurt on the field and getting hit in the head. They are also, and we've heard on the news, I'm sure, about football players that are having issues with memory and cognitive skills. Again, Alzheimer's is the most common cause. I wish I had a chart up here. It's actually found that when people pass from a form of dementia, it is usually a mixed dementia. There's the number for people with Alzheimer's is very small actually. If they actually could go in there and determine after death, most of it is a mixed type of dementia. So you do mostly have people that pass away usually have Alzheimer's and some other form of the dementias. Some causes of cognitive decline are reversible and not truly dementia. Some things like that, some medications can cause memory loss. Urinary tract infections are a big one, especially as we age and the older we get. They can cause a lot of confusion and memory problems. So anyone having some issues with memory, the first thing their physician would like to do is probably do some blood tests first of all to find out, do we have any vitamin deficiencies? Do we have a urinary tract infection going on? Are they on any kind of medications that may be causing issues with their memory? So that is something that they will definitely need to look at first in order to rule out that there's not something else going on versus someone that has actual beginning signs of dementia. Does anyone have any questions? Nope.
Is this deck of slides available somewhere?
They are not yet, but a lot of the information that we use is from the Alzheimer's Association. A lot of it is from Alzheimer's Tennessee, which is here in town. So we use a lot of their information, and we actually use a lot of their slides. So you can probably, if you go to the Alzheimer's Association or Alzheimer's Tennessee, there are a lot of this on their screens and stuff. So you should be able to find that on there. I'll be happy to share it though. If you have an email address and want to give that to me, I can send it to you. Absolutely, yes, absolutely. So just talk a little bit about the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's is basically determined with two things. You have the beta amyloid plaques and you have the tau protein tangles. So what happens is, for whatever reason, and this is something that they still do not know, why these plaques start to form outside of the cell itself. And these are very sticky plaques, and they start to bunch up and they start to block transmission of signals within the brain. It causes a disruption. When that disruption occurs, those cells will eventually begin to die. So we start losing that. The tau proteins actually build up within the cell itself, and it disrupts the cell structure. So think of maybe a straw, and you're trying to put, I don't know, something very large inside that straw, and it just keeps getting bigger and it just kind of breaks apart. That's what happens with the tau tangles. They start to bundle up and they start to tangle up within the cell structure, and it actually disrupts the cell structure. Once that happens, those cells will start to die off, which causes cell death. It causes disruptions. And as you can see here, you start to have atrophy, which is shrinking of the brain. So over here, we've got a healthy brain, and you can see here, look at the advanced Alzheimer's, look at the difference in the brain here. So that is what happens inside an Alzheimer's brain. So once again, they know that this stuff is going on, but the actual cause, what is the root cause of why this is happening? We are still doing a lot of research into that. So once again, going back to the early detection and diagnosis, those clinical trials, people can get into. So anything we can to advance the research for Alzheimer's is so important. So Alzheimer's Is it a normal part of aging? No, you're correct. It is not. It's a progressive and it's a fatal brain disease. Symptoms usually develop slowly and they get worse over time. It is not a normal part of aging. Stages of Alzheimer's are going to look very different for every individual. It's really hard to kind of sometimes stage somebody or kind of gear where they may be at in the process. During early Alzheimer's, it starts with, we start forgetting names quite a bit, and not just once or twice, but, continually forgetting things. It may be something as simple as, my mom loved to cook. And she never, had to use a recipe, hardly ever. She knew exactly what to put in everything. And it became where she would start to cook and she would forget and she'd start using these really strange ingredients. And she'd come up with this really odd concoction of food. So we knew there's something more going on. During the middle stage, people are gonna really start noticing more. There's more forgetfulness, may forget where they're at. My mom had problems, she got lost in town driving, and that's when we knew it was time to take away the driver's license because she went to pick something up for someone at church and had to turn around and come back home. She couldn't remember where she was at, and that scared her. So we went and had to talk with the doctor. They eventually took her license. But you're gonna see a lot more behavioral changes probably in the middle stage. The behavioral changes can be very difficult to deal with for caregivers. My mom was a very loving, sweet lady. She did everything for everybody. She was a caregiver. But she would get very frustrated because she was not able to do the things she could do. Sometimes it was a battle when it came to trying to get in the shower to use the restroom because she could no longer remember how to do those things and she needed help. And I'm sure in that confusion, she wanted to do those things, can't really voice it, was having difficulty having somebody help her do something that we consider, such a basic activity of daily living. And that's the big difference also between what is, normal aging and dementia. Dementia is defined when you no longer are able to carry on your activities of daily living. So you can have some mild cognitive impairment where you may be forgetting things. People's names, sometimes you walk into a room, that doesn't mean you're having mild cognitive impairment, but it could be. But when those things start to interfere with your activities of daily living, when you can no longer follow a recipe, you can't follow directions, you're having difficulty driving because you can't remember where you are. Those are big signs that, you could be leaning towards a diagnosis of dementia. So those things are important to make sure you talk to your physician about those things. All right, I am going to finally get into, well, I had a little chart here that talked about normal aging versus Alzheimer's disease. So there's a little thing there. I did give you a handout and it just talks about some things, what is normal aging versus Alzheimer's disease. A list of symptoms that you can kind of go through and kind of shows you what the difference between those are. So I'm not going to touch base too much on those. And once again, it's just, Alzheimer's is the most common cause and there is no cure. There are the drug options, like I said, to try and kind of keep people functioning for a longer period of time with the symptoms they have, or the IV infusions that they do give that can try and clear some of those amyloid plaques in the brain that are causing the memory issues. That can certainly help, but those are, once again, treatment is all dependent on your physician. So does anyone know what the biggest risk factor for Alzheimer's is? Age, absolutely. Our age is the biggest risk for Alzheimer's. After the age of 65, every 5 years, our risk doubles. So age is, so we're going to talk about a couple of things. So these are the non-modifiable risk factors. So these are things that we can't change. So advancing age is the #1 risk factor. After the age of 65, it does double every 5 years. After age 85, the risk is 1 in 3 people will have some form of dementia. Women are twice as likely to get Alzheimer's because we're caregivers. That's what I always tell people. But so unfortunately, as women, we have twice the risk. Also our ethnicity. So African Americans are twice as more likely to contract dementia, and Hispanics are 1.5 times more likely to contract dementia. Now, genetics. So there's a big debate on this. There is evidence that genes are a factor, but there's no specific gene that's been identified for older onset Alzheimer's. However, if you have a mother or grandmother or someone in the family that's had dementia, our risk factor is significantly higher if we did not have anyone. So my mom was the only person so far on either side of her family that has any form of dementia. Both mom and dad's side of the family, there's longevity on both sides, and my aunt was 102 and was as sharp as a tack. So we were very shocked with this diagnosis. It's just no one in the family had this before. So, all right. So we're gonna talk next. These are our modifiable risk factors, so things that we can change. What I thought was pretty incredible is we can lower our risk by up to 40% by making improvements with modifiable risk factors. So it talks about physical inactivity, obesity, our diet, tobacco use, substance abuse, diabetes, midlife hypertension, social isolation, low educational attainment, cognitive inactivity, and midlife depression. So all of these things are things that we are able to make a change and hopefully reduce our risk of getting dementia. So when it talks about lowering it by up to 40%, I thought that was pretty significant. So, so some things that we can do in our lifestyle to try and reduce our risk of that. And once again, it's just kind of going over some things here again. So our overall health is affected by several things. Genes and family history, sometimes we can't get away from that family history of things, and our environment and our lifestyle. So healthy habits are always beneficial for body and brain. When you go into your doctor's office, one thing I tell people, if you're going in for your annual visit, they check your blood pressure, they usually do your blood work, check your cholesterol, your weight, your height, all of that. Ask your doctor to do a memory screen. If it is a Medicare annual physical, cognitive screening is covered for a Medicare annual physical. So sometimes if I can't reach physicians, I can reach the patient and say, ask for it. So
I know, but how involved is that?
It is very simple, and I actually have something that I'm going to give to you at the end. It's a mini cog. It takes less than 5 minutes.
Okay.
Now, it is not a catch-all. Like I said, my mom passed with flying colors the first couple times, and so we had to be adamant and say, no, there is something going on. But it's also just it's a good baseline to keep. So next year, if someone comes in, you can start seeing if there's changes going on with what they do. There are several different kind of memory tests they can do. They can also do something that's called a slums test. It's a little more involved. The mini cog is a very short, very, very easy little tool to use. But it's something that can be done in just a matter of minutes. So the nurse can do it for the physician before he comes in, but you have to ask for it, because chances are it's probably not it's not a routine thing that's done, with your Medicare annual physical. So I do recommend that everyone ask their physician, please, can we do a memory screen so we can keep an eye on things and make sure that I've got good brain health, that my memory's staying intact. So that's very important. So what does the science tell us? So there's a lot of factors that increase the risk of heart disease and stroke. It can also increase the risk of cognitive decline and dementia. The midlife hypertension is one of the most, what's the word I'm looking for? It's very high on the scale, I guess, of risk factors for leading to dementia. Diabetes is on there, and also midlife obesity. So good cholesterol, it's good for the heart, and what's good for the heart is good for the brain. And I always bring this in because it's always nice to show you. So our cardiovascular, getting our cholesterol under control, because it can lead to vascular dementia if we have issues. So this is a little chart of cholesterol. So this is your good cholesterol, and you see how that can flow up there. And this is what it looks like when your cholesterol is building up and making a lot of plaque. So you're getting very few of that coming through, and there's some blockages there. And we already know our brain needs a lot of good oxygen, and it needs good blood flow. So if we don't have good blood flow because of the plaques, our brain is not getting what we need. So getting our cholesterol down is paramount. I also have a little thing here to show you on sugar, and I'm not going to talk too long about it, but the recommendations for sugar in our diet, it's different depending on what site you go to. Some say 50 grams of sugar a day, some are like 25 to 35. I'm just going to let you guys take a look at this about how much sugar is in what. For example, a Mountain Dew, I believe, has like 51 grams of sugar, so you're already over your sugar limit by drinking one of those. So we think about all the processed food that we eat. Diet is very huge. I'll get into that in just a few, so I won't talk too long about that right now. But the sugar that we're putting in our bodies is very, it is just not good for us at all. This is kind of small, and I'm sorry, it's really hard to read, but this just says that there is substantial evidence that chronic hypertension over the lifespan is the most prevalent risk factor for cognitive impairment and aging, with midlife hypertension strongly associated with later cognitive deficits. That was something that was pretty shocking to me. You know, you think about everything for risk factors. I was just kind of shocked that hypertension was such a prevalent risk factor. Long-term research has also demonstrated that people who had high blood pressure in midlife from 40 to 64 were more likely to develop dementia in later life, particularly the vascular dementia, which is usually caused by mini strokes and things like that with impeded blood flow. There is substantial evidence for a relationship between vascular risk factors and brain disorders, including cognitive decline and dementia. Up to 80% of people with Alzheimer's disease have significant vascular pathology in the brain. So once again, probably someone with Alzheimer's may also have vascular dementia as well, but they've been just diagnosed with the Alzheimer's. Vascular dementia is the second most common form of dementia behind Alzheimer's. So, and that again is caused by the reduced blood flow to the brain. It starves the brain of oxygen and the nutrients that it needs to function. Research shows that type 2 diabetes increases a person's risk for developing dementia, but that also includes how long they've had it and how severe their diabetes is. Diabetes, of course, diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, and obesity, they all hold hands. I'm not saying that every person has that, of course they don't, but they all are so interrelated. So if you have one, chances are you also have something else. Some of the changes that occur in Alzheimer's are similar to those in diabetes. In both the nerves in the brain, they can become resistant to insulin. If you actually type in type 3 diabetes now, Alzheimer's pops up. So they are definitely thinking that there is some form of insulin resistance in the brain that is contributing to Alzheimer's and different forms of dementia. So what we're putting in our bodies does make a difference. Obesity. Between the ages of 35 and 65, it can increase our dementia risk in later life by about 30%. It's also linked to other risk factors. They're 2 to 3 times more likely to have high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes. So once again, all those things are kind of hand-holding as far as our comorbidities. It can lead to chronic inflammation in the body. That definitely can affect the brain. Inflammation in the brain is linked to dementia, and it can cause overactivation of immune cells in the brain, which leads them to damage our nerve cells. So once again, healthy living is also related to us having a healthy brain. So any little changes we can make now, even if it's 1 or 2, it does have an impact. It's never too late to make those changes. And you can't see it here, but I just said it. Is it ever too late or too early to make changes? No, it is not. Yeah, people of all ages, you can benefit. Anytime we add in a healthy behavior, it's gonna be beneficial for us. It may not be seen right away, but anything we do that promotes good health is gonna be also good for our brain as well. So doing something that's heart healthy, once again, is also gonna be brain healthy for us. It just goes over some more things. Sleep. Sleep is essential for overall health and well-being. Does everybody sleep good, or does everybody not? Because I do not. No? Do you have trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or both?
Usually staying asleep because of my itching.
Okay. How about you ladies? Do you sleep okay?
I wake up too often and too early.
Ah, okay.
And I can sleep anywhere.
Ah, well, let me tell you what the science tells us. So, of course, sleep impacts our overall health. It affects our ability to maintain healthy blood pressure and blood sugar. It can cause problems with memory and thinking. Think about if you go a couple nights without good sleep. I do that every night. So, and I mean, I'm always talking that I'm in a brain fog, but it really has an impact. And I know you can't see this because this just got really, really terrible. But basically, in a nutshell, let me just tell you what sleep does. So when we sleep at night, our brain goes through this flushing system. And what that does is it removes those amyloid plaques in our brain. So especially our deep sleep. Our deep sleep is our restorative sleep for muscle health, all these good things. So during that deep sleep, our brain goes through that flushing period. And like I said, it flushes out those amyloid plaques. I think it's 25%, yes. So the research has shown that just going one night with horrible sleep, they found that those individuals have about 25 to 30% higher plaques that next day than someone who's had a good night's sleep. So I cannot impress about, getting good sleep. If you find the solution, let me know. I think I've tried just about every medicine out there to help me sleep, and it just doesn't work too well. But people who sleep 6 hours or less per night in their 50s and 60s were more likely to develop dementia later in life. So getting good quality sleep, setting bedtimes, trying to stay off our phones or tablets or watching TV, anything electronic, keeping our rooms at a comfortable temperature to sleep. I like my room nice and cool because I like lots of blankets on me. Trying to limit distractions. So anything that we can do to try and help us sleep better is always a thumbs up, because sleep is definitely linked to problems later on with dementia. I think that's just talking about getting good quality sleep. I'm gonna go through a lot of these slides. Being smoke-free. So smoking, of course, has a direct impact on our health and our brain. They found that smoking increases the risk of cognitive decline and also can increase the risk of dementia. So quitting smoking can reduce a person's chance of developing cognitive decline back down to the level of non-smokers. So after a certain period of time, I think they say it's like 7 years. If you've stopped smoking for about a 7-year period, they pretty much kind of put you back to a level of someone who has not smoked before. But of course, that plays an important role with our cardiovascular system and plaques that build up, oxygenation that goes throughout the body that our brain needs. So definitely quitting smoking is another risk factor. So if you're smoking, try and get with your physician, and there's medications, there's support groups to help you to be smoke-free. Taking care of our mental health. So of course it's important to prioritize yourself. You can need to make time for self-care. Stress is a big thing with dementia as well. So trying to get our stress levels down, trying to make time for ourselves. Taking care of ourselves is very, very important. Stress does horrible things to our body. If we're stressed out, it raises our blood pressure. It can raise our sugars. It impairs our sleep. So once again, I feel like a lot of our risk factors, they're kind of hand holders. They all interlink with one another in some way, form, or fashion. So trying to take care of that mental health is very important. Get moving. Physical activity activity can improve brain health, 100%. I think this is one of their most substantiated information that has to do with dementia. So physical activity, because of the cardiovascular benefits that also benefit the brain, is big. Consistent cardiovascular activity will reduce the risk of cognitive decline, not may, but will. So that is something that is a very big positive. Now it says it may directly benefit brain cells and reduce other risk factors. But getting moving and getting physical, it doesn't have to be anything major. Get out and walk with friends. If you're at the grocery store, park further down if the weather's nice and walk a little extra. If you're able to take stairs, take some stairs. Before my mom went into a memory unit, she would sit in her recliner at night and I would give her 2 weights, little 3-pound weights. And I'm like, let's do our arm exercises. So I'd have her over there pumping some iron. I tell people, if you don't have those, take a can of soup. It doesn't matter what you've got. Just anything that you can do to promote, some activity and do things that are good for our bones and our health is definitely going to be an improvement with our cardiovascular system in return to our brains. So keeping active, they recommend about 150 minutes each week. That seems like a lot. So about 2.5 hours. But if you think about it, and it doesn't have to be all in one fell swoop, so you don't have to do an hour of activity each day. They found that getting up and doing like 10 minutes, maybe 3 times a day is plenty. That has so many benefits for you. So just get up and get moving however you can do it. It's always better with people and it's always better with friends. So I like to walk a lot. So grab somebody and get them moving. Eating healthy. This also may reduce your risk of so many diseases. And once again, talking about the sugar and stuff, what's good for our heart, it's good for our brain. Eating a balanced diet may reduce risk of heart disease, cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, stroke, diabetes. I always tell people rule of thumb is grocery shop on the perimeter of your grocery store. So avoiding the processed foods. And that's really hard to do because we're very spoiled. We can just go and we can pick up anything that's prepackaged. But you have to make sure that it's not packed full of sugar. You have to make sure that you're getting nutrients in there. So too many of our processed food has empty calories, meaning it has no nutritional value at all for us, our bodies or our brain. So if we can eat more of the whole healthy foods, you're going to be doing your body and your brain a big service. So we have the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. DASH diet is been used a lot for like hypertension, so lowering your salt and stuff. But the big ones for dementia is the Mediterranean. They also have, it's called the MIND diet. It's kind of a mix between your DASH and your Mediterranean. But the big focus is on fruits and vegetables, a lot of your leafy green vegetables particularly, and the fruits particularly the berries, so strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, things like that. Healthier fats, the olive oil is being promoted quite heavily right now, so coconut oil also. Limiting your sugar and your salt, nuts, beans, whole grains, your lean meats, fish, and poultry. So sticking pretty much with those food groups there comprise the Mediterranean and a DASH diet. It has been known to show some improvement with cognition. That may not be 100% across the board, but people who've been eating a lot of processed food and then switching over to one of these diets, there's been several studies that have had good improvement with their cognition.
The library does have a Mediterranean diet, a DASH, MIND diet book, because I bought it in a cookbook book.
Good.
Here, I bought it back today. So
Okay, did you enjoy it, the
I sure
cookbook? Okay, good to know. So the library has a cookbook on that, so I'm gonna encourage everyone to come check it out. But, sorry folks, I'm having to scroll down here. So, will challenging your brain help lower your risk of cognitive decline?
Yes.
True.
Okay, yes. So, continuing to challenge our minds as we age can lower the risk of cognitive decline. So, anytime time we try something new, whether it's a new activity, we're looking at a new recipe or making it, anything that we can do new to make new pathways in the brain is going to help our cognitive function. So, and of course repeating that is gonna make that memory easier to retrieve. But anything new that we can do to keep our brains stimulated, we wanna do that. We wanna get as much education as we can. We wanna do as many activities as we can. So our brain is always making new pathways. So definitely challenging our brain. I know my mom used to love to play Scrabble and she loved to use crosswords. So that was her big thing. And I knew when we stopped playing Scrabble and when she stopped doing crossword puzzles, we were kind of starting on a decline. So,
so after they get, at some point, it doesn't help to challenge?
I think it always helps to challenge, yes. Even though she couldn't do those, there's other things. Just find a new activity. With her, she starts kind of forgetting how things are spelled and how to do things. The challenge with Alzheimer's is you have to find out what works. And you're gonna find out that some things are going to work great and they may work great for a day, but the next day it may not work at all. It's a challenge. It is a hard challenge. Caregivers will tell you there are so many tips and tricks for caregiving, but like I said, they may work well for a while with your loved one, and then suddenly it'll stop and it won't work at all. Or it may work one day and the next day it won't. The challenge is just trying to find it
that day.
Find it that day. Try something new. Something that you think is going to be appealing to them. My mom gets bored with certain things. She hates chair exercises, so she is in a memory unit, and they do these chair exercises. And normally, she used to like to do those. Last time we went there, she looked at me and she said, "Well, this is stupid." So she was not into doing chair exercises, but what she does like is she likes to get up and walk and get outside. So it's just finding something that is appealing to them, something that they enjoy. There's so much confusion going on inside, and it's so hard sometimes for them to tell people how they're feeling and what's going on. And it's very difficult sometimes trying to figure out what's happening. What do you need? What can we do that you can still enjoy things? It is always important from day one, I don't care, to the last moment, find something that's enjoyable for them, whether it's music or, like I said, my mom, sometimes when I show up, she's very disoriented. Most of the time she doesn't know who I am. I think I'm familiar to her. I don't ask her that anymore because that brings on a lot more confusion. You just gotta meet them where they're at in the moment. Don't try and correct, just meet them where they're at. But if I get her outside, and she loves to go for a drive in the car. So we go for a drive in the car, and every week we go get a cheeseburger and an apple pie from McDonald's. She loves it, she eats it. And it's amazing within a 15-20 minute period of time how much more alert she is. Her speech is better. She has word salad, so basically she says a bunch of stuff, but none of it makes a whole lot of sense. After I've had her out for a while, she can say a few sentences that are very clear. She understands more what's going on. So it's, like I said, it's just a challenge trying to find with someone who's living with dementia what works for them. And it's a daily thing that may change, it may change hour to hour. It's hard to predict. So, but definitely challenging the brain and keeping them active is so important. So that is one other risk factor we can work on, is just trying to keep our brains active. Keeping your mind active, it forms, like I said, new connections among our brain cells. It makes new pathways. It encourages blood flow to the brain. It can possibly maintain or even improve cognition. They have found, this says engaging in formal education can keep our brains healthy, but also early education is a risk factor. So people from a very early age who do not have a lot of good education, they have found have more cognitive issues later on in life. So whether or not it's that learning process at an early age that makes all these pathways, but that is something that they have put in as a risk factor also for dementia as we age. some of them that are not on here, staying connected. So socialization is crucial. Being isolated has definitely been linked to more of a cognitive decline. You think about the pandemic and people being isolated in nursing homes and other places, and how their cognition just kind of went down the tubes. So keeping them active as long as you can and socialize as much as you can, it has a lot of benefits for our brain. People who are socially active tend to make better choices and healthier choices, I should say. It's associated with living longer with fewer disabilities, and definitely supports our brain health. A couple things that they have recently added as a risk factor, and I don't think I have that in here, hearing loss. So hearing loss, they have found, has been linked simply because when we have hearing loss, we're not paying as much attention. We're having to strain to hear. We're using other parts of the brain that are having to focus more on what we're trying to hear, and it has been linked to that. Pollution is the other one that has been added to risk factors. So pollution is now on one of the risk factors for dementia. So with that, do you have a question?
No,
Any
I
questions?
was going to mention that I recently learned that if you do not get hearing assistance and you are lacking it, that part of the cognition in your brain cannot be revitalized after a certain period of time.
So that's interesting to say. Yes. So they're thinking, and like I said, when you're trying so hard to strain to hear something, that part of the brain stops working as far as what we're trying to remember and do that. So yes, so the hearing is super crucial. So if there's any hearing issues, get your hearing checked. If you have hearing aids, please use those hearing aids, because those definitely can make a difference. Traumatic brain injury is not on there, but of course, we kind of just touched base on that earlier. So like I said, those folks in the military that have had traumatic brain injuries, those with any kind of sports related injuries, they have a very high risk of developing dementia later, because dementia, of course, once again, is a neural, the Alzheimer's is neurodegenerative, so our brain cells, there's problems with that, but that's also caused by traumatic brain injuries. So anyone with a traumatic brain injury is something that they want to keep an eye on. They want to talk to their doctor, and that's a big focus as well. I can't say it enough, but if you have any fears that what's going on is not normal, age related, please make sure you talk to your physician. Your physician is never going to know to screen or to do any kind of testing unless you actually bring it up. Most of the time when people are diagnosed with a form of dementia, it's usually because their significant other or their caregiver or family member has brought them in and has, handed them a note before the doctor goes in, hey, there's some, we're getting really forgetful, we need you to check. So please don't be afraid to talk to your physician about getting your memory screened, because it's so important. So anyone have any questions for me? No? Okay, well that about wraps it up. So I hope you learned something today just about the modifiable risk factors, things that we can do. And like I said, if you know someone with dementia or a caregiver and you're needing help and you need resources, once again, I'm a free service. There are 5 of us navigators for the state of Tennessee right now. This was a grant funded project. So we're kind of figuring out the program. We're hoping it takes off and it does well, and we're able to help as many people as we can in the community. And if so, hopefully they can start putting other navigators in here. But right now, I'm in Putnam County. We have someone in Morgan and Scott County, Bradley County, Hardeman, and then we have Lynn Drew, who is at the Upper Cumberland Development District, and she is for the Upper Cumberland region itself. So if it's simply you need some information, I've got all kinds of information in my office about all kinds of things and resources. Please reach out. You can simply call the health department, ask for the Dementia Navigator, they'll transfer you to me, and we can set up an appointment.
So this is interesting. So in Davidson County, they don't have this.
They may not have it, but the Upper Cumberland, or not the Upper Cumberland, but the AAAD, which is the Area Agency on Aging and Disability for that area, could still set somebody up with resources. So
AAA?
AAAD, yes, the AAAD. They can contact them. They have family support programs and all kinds of different programs. They can always reach out though to one of us navigators. I'm gonna give you a sheet and it has all of our contact information, and we can always get you in touch, or that person in touch. So I don't care what county you're in, even if you're not here in Putnam County. I've driven to other counties, or I've gotten with our other navigators to reach out to someone that's closer to them for their county, because we don't want anyone to go without information. I mean, that is our job, is to inform the community and get you help when you need it. And if we can't do it here, we're gonna find you somebody for wherever you live to help you out. So they can always contact me and I can get them in touch with who they need to. So please reach out.
I'm the only one in my family that does not live in the Davidson County, and they think I'm very, and I don't know what they think, I'm pitiful, because I live, they consider a very remote,
A remote area here.
and I think, oh, you don't even know remote.
So, yeah, and I don't feel like we're remote. I feel like we have a lot going on here. In fact, when I took this position, I did not realize how many resources we actually have here in Putnam County. But the resources that, I didn't know about, which is wonderful doing what I do, is because people who need help with that, I can help you find those resources now, because I've got access to a lot of them that I can connect people with. So yeah, so once again, if someone does not live in this county, please still reach out. And I would love to, help you out and get you plugged into whoever you need to talk to get you the resources and the help you need. And I think, well, that's a mini COG assessment. I'm gonna go over that when we're finished here, but, yeah, so that's my information. I have cards. I can give you a card too when you leave here, so if you have questions or you have someone that you wanna give my information to, they can contact me. My email is tracy.bruneau@tn.gov, and that's the phone number there. The 528 is the health department phone number. You can ask for me, or I have a cell phone number, a work phone, that you can contact me with. But feel free to reach out anytime. I love what I do. It's a passion of mine, so if I can help just one person, it's a win for me. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you for being
Thank you for
here.
being here.
Excellent.